Good morning, welcome to Wednesday morning's thought for today. As always, we encourage you to come to our prayer meeting online, the Zoom prayer meeting. Most likely we're going to be stopping this at the end of June and resuming again in September. But if you want to come and join us tonight, we would love to see you there. Or if you want someone to pray for you specifically, on those tricky words, please think about that. We thought yesterday about people bringing this deaf, mute person to Jesus, and we talked about intercessory prayer and how important it is to be praying for other people instead of always thinking about ourselves. And so if we can pray for you, we would love to do that tonight. If there's something that you need prayer for, we promise we will hold it confidentially and it won't go beyond the prayer meeting. But I would encourage you, if you need prayer, let us know. Or if you want to come yourself and explain to us how we can pray to you, that would be wonderful. That's tonight at 7:30 on Zoom, and we'd love to see you there. In the meantime, we're picking up our story this morning, and we're touching on something which to be honest with you, I read through a number of commentaries on this and didn't quite get a satisfactory answer. And so I'm going to give you how I understand it after I read and prayed through this passage. It's a passage where we've been looking at it since Sunday. Jesus has arrived in this area, the Decapolis, the area of 10 towns, and he's somewhere within this area, and people have brought this man who is deaf and also somewhat mute as well, and they've brought him to Jesus. They've begged Jesus to heal him, or to at least put his hands on this person. We assume that that's what they wanted. They wanted healing. But the issue comes when Jesus, instead of creating this circus for them all to see him healing this man and for everything to get out of control or whatever, and we don't know what it is. And I mentioned on Sunday that maybe Jesus, in looking at this man's eyes, saw something in him where he didn't want to do it in front of the crowd. He wanted to have that peace and quiet with him, that uniqueness of this one-to-one relationship with this poor soul. And so he took him away and he dealt with him privately, which is a beautiful picture where Jesus didn't want to do it all so blatantly open in the area where he knew they were going to find it hard to control what they'd heard and seen. And so he takes him away, and there's this strange picture that's painted for us. Jesus, verse 33 of Mark 7, and taking him aside from the crowd privately, he put his fingers into his ears, and after spitting, touched his tongue. And looking up to heaven, he sighed and said to him, Ephphatha, which is, be opened. Now this is a strange picture, because we would assume that all Jesus would need to do would be to speak healing to this man. But for some reason, Jesus decides he's going to do something different. So he puts his fingers in his ears. Now remember, he couldn't explain to the man what he was going to do. He was showing him, in a sense, these are your ears. I'm plugging your ears. And when I take my fingers out from your ears, your hearing will be restored. Jesus is touching. He's using spit against spit in the mouth to restore. He's doing things which seem very odd to us, but yet in some ways these things were quite normal. There's a story told of how an emperor once spat on a man and the man was healed, and the idea of spittle was quite a prominent idea in that part of the world in that time. This idea that it was not so much magical, but there's something special about it. Now, we don't know if Jesus was buying into that, but this is what Jesus did. In chapter 8, we'll read about how he did something different with a man's eyes when they were blind. And yet we feel, well, Jesus, all he needs to do is touch this man and say, be healed, and everything would come back to normal. Or Jesus could only just speak to the man. He doesn't even have to touch him, and the man will be healed. We know that this has happened throughout. But for Jesus' own good purposes, he decides he's going to do something slightly different. And that's the way Jesus works. We can't, as I said on Sunday, we can't put him in a box and say, this is what Jesus does. This is the only thing that Jesus does. This is the only way that Jesus operates. No, he'll do it whatever way he wants, but he will do it for his glory, and he will do it so that it's for our good. Now, there's a little thought I want to give you just before this happens. We read here, and taking him aside from the crowd, he did this, and then he looks up to heaven. Do you remember when he had the fish and the loaves, and he looked up to heaven and he gave thanks to God? So there's this automatic communion or connection between him and we assume his heavenly Father. We know Jesus ascended And so we think of heaven as being upward, we think of God as being above us. And so Jesus looks up. But as he looks up, we read also this little tiny piece that nobody seems to mention. It says, and looking up to heaven, he sighed. He sighed. Now, I don't know if you've ever thought about sighing. This idea of just going, you hear people do it. Maybe you've done it yourself. You know, maybe you sit down at the end of the day and you go, I'm glad that day's over. Or maybe something happens in your life and you just don't have the words to say it. You're just almost as, you know, as my grandfather used to say at the end of your tether, where you haven't anything left and you just sigh as if, I can't do anything more. Why was Jesus sighing? Jesus wasn't out of power. Jesus hadn't been exhausted. What was Jesus sighing about? Where does this sigh come from? It comes surely from the sense that Jesus is so aware of what sin has done to the world, how sin has corrupted the world, how because of sin, mankind has fallen, and with the fall has come all the problems that we have in the world. Obviously, sickness and illness being part of that. And here's a man in front of him, and yet another man. Now, we don't know how many of these sorts of cases he's encountered in this 120-mile journey he's made. But here's another one. Here's another person who has been held in the grip of sin. And it's quite obvious from the words that are used that this idea of being opened and being released and being loosed and being set free, that there's a sense that his illness had to do with, basically because of sin in the world, there's sickness. And so because of sin, this man was the way he was. And it's almost as if Jesus is just fed up with the evil in the world, fed up with sin in the world. And if that is the case, and I'm assuming from what I read and what I understand and the little bits I've gleaned from my commentaries, if that is the case, and Jesus is just tired of the effects of sin on people and in the world, how much more would Jesus be sighing today because of the sin in our world? Sin doesn't go away. Sin doesn't somehow resolve itself or get better. Sin will be with us as long as this earth exists. We are here until God wraps this planet up and rolls it up like a carpet, if you like, and it creates a new heaven and a new earth. We will have to contend with sin. And so I wonder, how often do you sigh because of the sin in the world? When you listen to the news and you hear the issues in politics, you hear the issues with health around the world, you hear the issues with sin, what people have done to other people. And I wonder, do you often lift your eyes to heaven and just sigh, just acknowledge the sin in the world, but also acknowledge that God is supreme, knowing that God will one day be victorious. He's already won, but we want to see that victory lived out in people's lives here and now. But that day is still ahead of us, and that will only come when Christ returns. So Christ, I believe, was sighing simply because of the effects of sin and what sin had done through illness and sickness and disability on this person. And so I think he's still sighing because of the evil in the world. And we, I suppose, as believers need to sigh with him, but also trust him and try to be part of that solution by bringing Christ into the world around us. It's a huge thought, I know, for a Wednesday morning, and forgive me, but it's this sighing of Jesus Christ that had me wondering and sighing with him in a sense. So be encouraged, but keep fighting, keep showing Jesus to people around you, keep praying for them, keep bringing them to the Lord, and together we will allow Christ's kingdom to move in through us into those around us, and all for his glory. Hopefully we'll see you tonight at the prayer meeting. Anyway, have a good Wednesday, and God willing, we'll see you tomorrow. God bless.